Every Monday morning at 5:30 a.m., Miguel Ramirez pulled his old blue truck into the staff parking lot of Westlake Preparatory Academy. Today was no different as he grabbed his thermos of coffee and headed toward the maintenance entrance. The morning air felt crisp against his weathered face as the sun barely peeked over the horizon. Miguel had worked as the head custodian at Westlake Prep for 15 years. At 52, his salt and pepper hair and strong hands told the story of a man who knew honest work. The prestigious private school served the children of doctors, lawyers, business executives, and even a few minor celebrities. With its sprawling campus and state-of-the-art facilities, Westlake Prep looked more like a small college than a high school. As Miguel walked the familiar path to his office, he mentally prepared himself for what he might find. The past few months had followed a frustrating pattern. He unlocked the doors to the aquatic center and flicked on the lights. The Olympic-sized swimming pool, normally a point of pride for the school, came into view. "Not again," he muttered, his shoulders dropping at the sight. Empty bottles of expensive vodka floated in the water. Soppy pizza boxes lay scattered across the deck chairs. Someone had thrown a lounge cushion into the deep end. Music speakers, apparently abandoned in a hurry, sat dangerously close to the pool's edge, the sharp smell of chlorine mixed with spilled alcohol and the lingering scent of marijuana. Miguel set down his coffee and pulled out his phone to document the mess before cleaning it up. This was the third party this month. He could tell which students were responsible, the same group of seniors who walked the halls like they owned the place. Their parents donated enough money to have buildings named after them, and these kids knew it. He began fishing out the debris with a pool net, his movements efficient from practice. The maintenance team wouldn't arrive for another hour, and Miguel wanted the worst of it gone before they came. As he worked, he thought about his own daughters, both working their way through community college on scholarships and part-time jobs. They would never dream of destroying property like this. At 7:15 a.m., Miguel knocked on Principal Harrison's door with his weekly incident report. Dr. Harrison, a tall man with thinning blonde hair and expensive suits, waved him in without looking up from his computer. "Let me guess, Miguel. Another pool incident?" The principal sighed, finally meeting Miguel's eyes. "Yes, sir. This time they damaged one of the starting blocks. Looks like someone tried to use it as a diving board. It's going to need replacement." Dr. Harrison frowned. "That's a $1,200 repair. I'll address it at the morning assembly." But Miguel had heard this before. The principal would give a stern warning to the entire student body. He would remind them about respecting school property. Then nothing would happen. No consequences, no investigations. As Miguel left the office, he passed Blake Westfield and his friends lounging against the lockers. Blake, the son of the school's biggest donor, smirked at Miguel. "Hey, Mr. Ramirez," Blake called out, his voice dripping with false politeness. "Pool looking clean today?" His friends laughed, not bothering to hide their amusement. Miguel nodded politely and continued walking. In 15 years, he had learned when to pick his battles, but something was changing inside him. The constant disrespect, the cleaning up after entitled teenagers, the knowledge that no matter how many times he reported these incidents, nothing would change. By the time he reached the janitor's closet, Miguel Ramirez had made a decision. This situation couldn't continue. If the school wouldn't hold these students accountable, perhaps it was time he found another way. The following Friday afternoon, Miguel Ramirez stayed late to polish the trophy case near the administration offices. Through the glass wall of the conference room, he noticed Principal Harrison in a meeting with Mr. Westfield, Blake's father and chairman of the school board. Their voices carried through the partially open door. "I understand your concerns about property damage," Mr. Westfield said, leaning back in his chair. "But kids will be kids, Harrison. We all did stupid things at their age." Miguel slowed his polishing, ears perking up at the conversation. "The pool repairs are becoming costly," Principal Harrison replied, his voice hesitant. "And the swim team coach is complaining about practice disruptions." Mr. Westfield laughed. "I'll write another check. Consider it part of my annual donation. Maybe we can install better security cameras." Miguel frowned. The school already had security cameras covering the pool area, but somehow they never seemed to capture anything useful on weekend nights. Last month, when Miguel had asked to review the footage, the security guard told him the system had technical issues every weekend. Walking back to his storage room, Miguel passed the school's office. Inside, he spotted Blake Westfield chatting with Todd, the young aide assistant who managed the security systems. "So we're good for tomorrow night?" Blake asked, slipping something into Todd's hand. "Yeah, man, same as usual. System maintenance scheduled from 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. No recordings," Todd replied, pocketing what looked like cash. Miguel ducked out of sight before they noticed him. Now he understood why the cameras never caught anything. Saturday night, Miguel couldn't sleep. At midnight, he drove back to the school. He parked his truck down the street and walked toward campus, staying in the shadows. He just wanted to confirm his suspicions. From behind a row of bushes near the aquatic center, Miguel had a clear view of the parking lot. Several expensive cars were parked haphazardly, a Mercedes SUV, a Tesla, and even a Maserati that Miguel recognized as Blake's birthday present from last year. Music thumped from inside the building. Through the windows, colored lights flashed across the pool area. Miguel could see at least 20 students inside, drinking and dancing. Someone had brought a DJ setup. In the pool, several students splashed around with their clothes on. Miguel pulled out his phone and took a few photos from a distance, careful to remain hidden. He wasn't trying to get anyone in trouble. He just needed evidence that this was happening with clear knowledge of who was responsible. Sunday morning, Miguel returned to campus early. He wasn't scheduled to work, but he wanted to assess the damage before Monday. It was worse than he imagined. Someone had broken the glass door to the coach's office. The pool water had a strange blue tint. Someone had dumped colored dye into it. Empty bottles and food containers littered every surface. One of the diving boards had been detached from its mount, now floating in the pool. Miguel documented everything with his phone. When he tried the door to the equipment room, he found it unlocked. Inside, several expensive training devices were missing, and chemical storage containers stood open, a serious safety violation. On Monday morning, Miguel submitted his report directly to Principal Harrison, including the photos he'd taken of the cars in the parking lot. "Miguel, these photos were taken after hours," Principal Harrison said, frowning. "Were you trespassing on school property?" "Sir, I'm reporting vandalism and theft," Miguel replied, taken aback. "The swim timer systems are missing. Those cost thousands." "I'll look into it," the principal said, sliding the report into his drawer. "But please understand, accusing specific students, especially from prominent families, requires solid evidence." That afternoon, Miguel was called back to the principal's office. Dr. Harrison sat behind his desk, looking uncomfortable. "The missing equipment has been returned," he said. "Anonymous drop-off. The students involved have been spoken to." "And the consequences?" Miguel asked. "That's a confidential disciplinary matter," the principal replied dismissively. "But I'm sure it won't happen again." 2 weeks later, it happened again. This time, someone had scratched graffiti into the pool's underwater observation window, an expensive repair that would take weeks. Miguel realized then that nothing would change unless he took matters into his own hands. Miguel arrived at school on Monday morning with a strange feeling in his stomach. Something told him today would be different. As he unlocked the aquatic center doors, the smell hit him immediately, not just the usual chlorine, but something chemical and wrong. "Dios mío," he whispered, flipping on the lights. The pool water had turned a murky green-brown color. Floating on the surface were dozens of empty beer cans, plastic cups, and what looked like someone's abandoned underwear. Chairs had been thrown into the deep end, and a makeshift rope swing hung from the ceiling rafters. But what made Miguel's heart sink was the equipment panel near the filtration room. Someone had pried it open, revealing a mess of wires and broken controls. A large water puddle spread across the floor beneath it, still growing from an active leak. Miguel rushed to the emergency shut-off valve and turned it, stopping the water flow. He pulled out his phone and called the school's maintenance supervisor. "Joe, we have a serious problem at the pool. The filtration system is damaged. Looks deliberate." Within an hour, a small crowd had gathered. The maintenance supervisor, the athletic director, the swim coach, and finally, Principal Harrison all stood staring at the disaster. The swim coach, Coach Martinez, looked close to tears. "The regional championship is in 2 weeks," she said, her voice shaking. "We can't practice like this. The team has worked all year for this." The maintenance supervisor knelt by the damaged control panel. "This wasn't an accident. Someone took a crowbar to this. We're looking at $15,000 minimum in repairs. and at least a week with the pool closed. Principal Harrison rubbed his forehead. "I'll call an emergency assembly. This has gone too far." As they spoke, Miguel noticed something glinting in the pool drain at the shallow end. He grabbed a net and fished it out, an expensive gold watch. He recognized it immediately. Blake Westfield had been showing it off last week, bragging that it was a pre-graduation gift from his father. Miguel handed the watch to Principal Harrison without a word. The principal glanced at it, then quickly pocketed it. "I'll make sure this gets back to its owner," he said quietly. Later that morning, Miguel was mopping the hallway outside the science labs when he overheard Blake Westfield and his friends talking around the corner. "Dude, you lost your dad's Rolex," one of them asked. "Yeah, but Dad'll buy me another one. No big deal." Blake laughed. "Worth it though. That party was epic. Did you see Trevor swing from the ceiling? And when Madison pushed the DJ table into the pool? Classic. The look on Coach Martinez's face this morning," another boy said, mimicking a crying face. "Whatever. It's just a stupid swim meet," Blake replied. "My dad donated half the money for that pool anyway. Practically owns the place." Miguel gripped his mop handle so tightly his knuckles turned white. Coach Martinez had been at Westlake Prep even longer than he had. She had built the swim program from nothing, mentoring kids who earned college scholarships through their hard work, and these entitled brats were laughing about ruining it all. That afternoon, Miguel sat in his small office, staring at the incident reports he'd filed over the past year. Each one documented property damage, each one named the likely culprits, and each one had been ignored or handled with a meaningless slap on the wrist. On his desk sat a framed photo of his daughters at their community college orientation. They had worked summer jobs, maintained perfect grades, and still struggled to afford textbooks. Meanwhile, Blake Westfield could destroy thousands of dollars of equipment and laugh it off. Miguel pulled out a fresh piece of paper and began writing. This wasn't just about pool parties anymore. This was about justice, about consequences, about teaching these kids that the real world didn't care who their parents were. The plan that formed in Miguel's mind was simple but risky. He could lose his job, but after 15 years of loyal service, watching the system fail repeatedly, Miguel Ramirez had reached his breaking point. He picked up his phone and made a call to an old friend who worked in security systems. Miguel sat in his living room that evening, his laptop open on the coffee table. His small house was quiet except for the tapping of his fingers on the keyboard as he searched online for hidden cameras. The prices made him wince. Quality waterproof cameras with night vision weren't cheap. He sipped his coffee and looked at his bank account. The numbers on the screen reminded him of how carefully he'd saved over the years. Most of that money was for his daughter's education, but this felt important too, a different kind of education. His phone rang. It was Coach Martinez. "Miguel? Sorry to call so late," she said, her voice tired. "I just wanted to thank you for your help today. The repair company says they might be able to fix the system faster than we thought." "That's good news," Miguel replied. "How are the kids on the team taking it?" Coach Martinez sighed. "They're devastated. Alicia Gomez was crying in the locker room. She's worked so hard for a swimming scholarship." After they hung up, Miguel made his decision. He ordered 3 high-quality waterproof cameras with motion sensors and night vision. The total came to $847, nearly a month's worth of savings. He chose express shipping. The next day, Miguel approached Coach Martinez in her office during lunch break. "I have an idea," he said quietly, closing the door behind him, "but I need your help." He explained his plan. The coach listened, arms crossed, her expression changing from skeptical to thoughtful. "You could lose your job," she said finally. "Maybe," Miguel admitted. "But if we do nothing, this will keep happening. Think about Alicia and the other swimmers." Coach Martinez nodded slowly. "What do you need from me?" "Just the code to the aquatic center and your word that you'll back me up if this works." 2 days later, the package arrived at Miguel's home. That night, he studied the camera manuals carefully, testing each device in his backyard. They were smaller than he expected, perfect for hiding. On Saturday afternoon, Miguel entered the aquatic center using the code Coach Martinez had given him. The facility was empty, the swim team practicing at a neighboring school's pool until repairs were completed. He worked methodically. The first camera went high in a corner near the ceiling, disguised among the existing fixtures. Its lens had a perfect view of the main pool area. The second camera he placed in the equipment room, hidden among the cleaning supplies. The third went near the entrance, positioned to capture everyone who came and went. Unlike the school's official security system, these cameras uploaded footage directly to Miguel's private cloud account. No one could tamper with them or erase the evidence. As he worked, Miguel thought about his daughters, about how hard they'd worked for everything they had, about the lessons he'd taught them on respect and responsibility. This wasn't just about catching rich kids breaking rules. It was about justice. After installing the cameras, Miguel visited the security office. The weekend guard, Marcus, was a friendly older man who had worked at the school for decades. "Hey Marcus," Miguel said casually. "Any plans to check the pool area tonight? I noticed some maintenance issues I forgot to fix." Marcus shook his head. "Nah, Todd from it told me to skip the regular rounds back there. Something about system updates." He lowered his voice. "Between you and me, this happens most weekends. Always system updates when certain kids want to party." Miguel nodded. "Just curious, have you ever mentioned this to Principal Harrison?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "3 times. Last time, he reminded me I'm close to retirement. I got the message." That evening, Miguel checked the camera feed from his home computer. The cameras were working perfectly, showing the empty pool area from 3 different angles. The resolution was excellent, even in the dim emergency lighting. His younger daughter, Alina, passed behind him and glanced at the screen. "Dad, what are you doing?" she asked. Miguel explained the situation in simple terms, how the rich students were damaging school property and getting away with it because of who their parents were. Alina considered this. "So you're like a detective now?" she asked with a small smile. "No, Maija," Miguel replied, "just someone trying to make things fair." As night fell, Miguel kept one eye on the camera feed while helping Elena with her college assignment. Around 10:30 p.m., the screen showed headlights in the parking lot. The pool area's door opened. Blake Westfield entered first, carrying cases of expensive liquor. Behind him streamed 20 other students. One boy wheeled in large speakers. Miguel smiled grimly as he started recording. This time, there would be consequences. Miguel sat in his small home office, eyes fixed on his computer screen. The clock on the wall read 11:45 p.m. His earlier tension had given way to a strange calmness as he watched the party unfold through his hidden cameras. The newly repaired pool area had transformed into an impromptu nightclub. Colored lights flashed across the water, music blasted from expensive speakers, and at least 30 students danced and drank around the pool's edge. Blake Westfield stood on a pool chair, pouring vodka directly into people's mouths like some king presiding over his subjects. "Unbelievable," Miguel muttered, taking a sip of his coffee. He had set up a special folder on his computer to capture and organize the footage. Each time something particularly damaging happened, he saved it as a separate clip with a timestamp. At midnight, a girl climbed onto the high dive and attempted a backflip while holding a bottle. She missed the pool by inches, crashing onto the deck. Instead of helping her, her friends laughed and recorded her fall on their phones. Miguel quickly saved this clip, labeling it Safety Violation Number 1. Around 1 a.m., things escalated. 2 boys pried open the chemical storage cabinet, despite the clear warning signs. They began mixing pool chemicals in empty vodka bottles. "That's dangerous," Miguel said aloud, leaning closer to the screen. He saved this clip as Safety Violation Number 2, Hazardous Materials. By 2 a.m., the party had reached a destructive peak. Someone had brought spray paint, and several students were tagging the walls with their names and crude drawings. Blake Westfield directed the action, pointing out places for others to vandalize. Miguel saved clip after clip, building a comprehensive record of the night's events. He was no longer just documenting property damage. He was capturing evidence of dangerous behavior, vandalism, and complete disregard for safety. At 3:30 a.m., the most shocking moment occurred. Blake and 2 other boys began removing parts from the newly repaired filtration system. "We should take souvenirs," Blake slurred into the camera, unaware he was being recorded. "My dad paid for this anyway." When they finally left at 4 a.m., the pool area looked like a disaster zone. Water pooled on the floor from splashing, Empty bottles floated in the pool, and spray paint covered several walls. The filter panel hung open with parts missing. Miguel saved the final clips, then began organizing all the evidence. He created a folder for each student he could identify, with clear images of their faces and timestamps of their actions. He was careful to document not just property damage, but also safety violations and theft. At 6 a.m., bleary-eyed but determined, Miguel drove to a copy shop that had just opened. He brought his laptop and a flash drive. "I need to print some photos," he told the clerk. "Color, high quality." An hour later, Miguel had a thick folder containing dozens of printed images. Each photo was labeled with the student's name, for those he could identify, the time, and the specific violation. He also had 3 complete copies of the video files on separate flash drives. Back at home, Miguel showered and changed into his work clothes. Today was Sunday. He wasn't scheduled to work, but he needed to document the physical damage before anyone could clean it up. As he drove to school, Miguel reflected on what he had accomplished. This wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability. These kids needed to learn that actions had consequences, no matter how rich their parents were. At school, Miguel took photos of the physical damage with his phone, comparing it to the video evidence he had collected. The smell of chlorine mixed with alcohol and paint fumes filled the air. Coach Martinez arrived as he was finishing. Her face fell when she saw the state of the facility. "They did it again," she said quietly, surveying the damage. Miguel nodded. "Yes, but this time we have everything we need." He showed her some of the photos on his phone. Her eyes widened. "You actually caught them on camera," she said. "All of them." "Every minute," Miguel confirmed. "Every face, every action." Coach Martinez looked at Miguel with new respect. "What are you going to do with this?" Miguel tucked the folder under his arm. "Not what you might think. I have a better plan than just giving this to Principal Harrison." As they stood there, Miguel's phone buzzed with a calendar alert. School board meeting, Tuesday 7 p.m. He smiled. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Miguel spent Monday organizing his evidence. He created a professional presentation with clear labels, timestamps, and identifications. Each slide showed a specific violation with the school policy it broke listed beneath it. He worked late into the night, rehearsing what he would say at the board meeting. During lunch, Miguel visited the school secretary, ND. "I'd like to request time to speak at tonight's board meeting," Miguel said politely. Mrs. Peterson looked surprised. "Miguel, those meetings are usually just the board members and administrators. What did you want to discuss?" "Facilities maintenance issues," he replied, keeping his answer vague but truthful. "It's important." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I'll put you on the agenda. 5 minutes, right after the budget report." "Thank you," Miguel said with a small smile. "That's perfect." At 6:45 p.m., Miguel entered the school's conference room dressed in his best clothes, a dark blue suit he normally saved for church. He carried a laptop bag and his carefully prepared folder. The large oval table was already half filled with board members in expensive suits and designer dresses. Mr. Westfield sat at the head of the table, checking his phone. Principal Harrison sat nearby, looking nervous as Miguel entered. A few parents from the PTA occupied chairs along the wall, along with 2 teachers representing the faculty. Miguel took a seat near the back, heart pounding but face calm. Coach Martinez slipped in a few minutes later, giving him a subtle nod of support. At precisely 7 p.m., Mr. Westfield called the meeting to order. They proceeded through routine matters, budget approvals, curriculum updates, and a report on college admissions. Next, we have Miguel Ramirez, head of maintenance, with some facilities concerns, Mr. Westfield announced, checking his watch. "You have 5 minutes, Miguel." Miguel connected his laptop to the projector and stood at the front of the room. His hands trembled slightly, but his voice was steady. "Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I've worked at Westlake Prep for 15 years, maintaining the buildings where your children learn. I take pride in my work." He clicked to the first slide, a photo of the pool area before any damage. "This is our aquatic center, built with generous donations from many of you in this room. It's one of the finest high school facilities in the state." He clicked again. The screen showed the damage from this weekend: spray paint, broken equipment, and trash everywhere. "This is how it looked this Sunday morning." A murmur ran through the room. Principal Harrison shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Over the past year, our pool has been repeatedly vandalized during unauthorized weekend parties. Repairs have cost the school over $30,000. The swim team has missed practice for weeks. Mr. Westfield cleared his throat. Miguel, we're aware of these incidents. They're being handled through proper channels. With respect, sir, they are not, Miguel replied firmly. Which is why I felt compelled to document what's happening. He clicked to the next slide, the screen filled with a clear image of Blake Westfield and his friends entering the pool area, carrying alcohol. The room fell silent. This was taken Saturday night at 10:37 p.m. I installed my own cameras after the school's security system repeatedly failed to capture evidence. Miguel moved through his presentation methodically. Each slide showed a different student breaking a specific rule. Names appeared beneath faces. Actions were time-stamped. When he showed Blake removing parts from the filtration system, Mr. Westfield's face turned deep red. This is outrageous, he finally exploded. You spied on students? This is an invasion of privacy. Miguel remained calm. These cameras recorded activities in a school facility, which is public property. There is no expectation of privacy when breaking into school buildings. A mother in the audience stood up. Is that my daughter Madison, with alcohol? She told me she was at a study group. More parents began recognizing their children. The room filled with shocked voices. Miguel raised his hand. I'm not here to get students in trouble. I'm here because our system of accountability is broken. These aren't just pranks. They're crimes. Vandalism. Destruction of property. Theft. He turned to face the entire board. If these students had broken into any other building in town and done this damage, they would face serious consequences. Being wealthy shouldn't make them immune to responsibility. As his 5 minutes ended, Miguel distributed copies of his report to each board member. The swim team deserves better. The school deserves better. And these students deserve to learn that actions have consequences. That's a more valuable lesson than anything they'll learn in a classroom. The conference room erupted into chaos after Miguel finished his presentation. Parents shouted questions, board members whispered urgently to each other, and Principal Harrison looked like he might faint. Mr. Westfield pounded his gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order. This meeting will come to order, he shouted, his face still flushed with anger. When the room finally quieted, he turned to Miguel. Mr. Ramirez, while we appreciate your concern, this matter should have been handled through proper channels. Before Miguel could respond, a woman stood up from the audience. Miguel recognized her as Dr. Chen, a surgeon whose daughter was on the swim team. What proper channels? She asked sharply. My daughter tells me the swim team has reported these incidents multiple times. Nothing has been done. She looked directly at Principal Harrison. Is this true, Dr. Harrison? The principal adjusted his tie nervously. We've addressed each incident according to school policy, but without clear evidence. You have clear evidence now, another parent interrupted. I just saw my son destroying school property on video. My son, who told me he was at a debate team sleepover. More parents began speaking up, some expressing shock at seeing their children involved, others demanding to know why these parties have been allowed to continue. Coach Martinez raised her hand and was recognized by the board. The swim team has lost weeks of practice time this year due to these incidents, she said firmly. We have regional championships in 10 days. These aren't victimless pranks. They've directly harmed hardworking students who've never broken a rule. Mr. Westfield seemed to realize the meeting was slipping out of his control. He looked around the room, seeing many angry parents who were major donors to the school. His usual confidence wavered. Perhaps, he said carefully, we need to review our security protocols and disciplinary procedures. Perhaps, Dr. Chen replied, we need to start by holding the students in those videos accountable for their actions, including your son, Mr. Westfield. The room fell silent. Everyone turned to look at the board chairman, waiting for his response. Mr. Westfield's jaw tightened, but something in his expression shifted. He looked at the photo still frozen on the screen, his son, clearly caught in the act of vandalism. You're right, he said quietly, surprising everyone. No special treatment, not even for Blake. He turned to address the entire board. I propose we form a disciplinary committee immediately. Every student identified in these videos will face appropriate consequences according to school policy. Principal Harrison looked uncomfortable. Sir, maybe we should discuss this privately. No more private discussions, Mr. Westfield interrupted. That's how we got here. We'll handle this transparently. He looked at Miguel. Mr. Ramirez, would you serve on this committee? Your perspective would be valuable. Miguel nodded, surprised by the request. Yes, sir, I would. The board voted unanimously to form the committee, which would include 2 board members, 2 teachers, Miguel, and 2 parent representatives. As the meeting continued, they outlined immediate actions. All identified students would be suspended pending a hearing. Those who had damaged property would pay for repairs. Community service hours would be required. The school's security system would be upgraded and monitored by an outside company. After the meeting, parents approached Miguel in the hallway. Some thanked him for bringing the issue to light. Others looked embarrassed as they apologized for their children's behavior. Dr. Chen shook his hand firmly. My daughter Alicia works so hard. She gets to school at 5 a.m. for swim practice every day. Thank you for standing up for kids like her. Even Mr. Westfield stopped Miguel before he left. That took courage, he said quietly. I'm not happy about how you did it, but, he paused, looking genuinely troubled. I've been too easy on Blake. That ends now. As Miguel walked to his truck in the empty parking lot, his phone buzzed with a text from Coach Martinez. You did it. Real change happening. Team says TANKYU. For the first time in months, Miguel drove home feeling that justice was finally being served. Tomorrow would bring challenges. Some students would be angry, some parents might fight back. But tonight, he had shown that at Westlake Prep, rules applied to everyone, regardless of wealth or status. He smiled as he thought about what he would tell his daughters. Sometimes, doing the right thing wasn't easy, but it was always worth it. 6 months had passed since the board meeting that changed everything at Westlake Preparatory Academy. On a bright spring morning, Miguel Ramirez walked through the main hallway, nodding at students who greeted him by name. The school felt different now. Posters about respect and community responsibility decorated the walls. The trophy case displayed not just sports achievements, but also community service awards. Near the cafeteria, a new plaque honored students who had volunteered over 100 hours to local charities. Miguel stopped to adjust a slightly crooked picture frame, a photo of the swim team celebrating their regional championship victory 3 months ago. Coach Martinez had insisted his name be included among the team's supporters on the plaque beneath it. As he continued his morning rounds, Miguel passed Blake Westfield cleaning graffiti off a bathroom wall. The boy looked up and nodded respectfully. Almost done, Mr. Ramirez, Blake said. I'll make sure it's perfect before class. Miguel inspected Blake's work. Looking good, you've gotten better at this. Blake had changed the most of all the students involved in the pool incidents. After his 3-week suspension, he had returned to school humbled and quieter. His father had made him get a part-time job to pay for his share of the damages, and the experience of working for minimum wage had been eye-opening for the wealthy teenager. Student council meeting at lunch today, Blake reminded Miguel. We're voting on the new campus beautification project. Your input would be helpful. Miguel nodded. I'll be there. One of the most surprising changes had been Blake's election to student council. His platform had focused on accountability and second chances, lessons he claimed to have learned the hard way. At the Aquatic Center, Miguel found everything in perfect order. The new security system featured tamper-proof cameras and required electronic keycards for entry. A student-faculty committee now oversaw facility usage, ensuring equal access for all school programs. Near the pool, a group of freshman swimmers was helping Coach Martinez set up for practice. Among them was Alicia Gomes, now team captain despite only being a sophomore. Morning, Mr. Ramirez, she called cheerfully. Guess what? I got the scholarship. Full ride to State University next year. Miguel smiled broadly. Congratulations, your hard work paid off. Couldn't have done it without you, she replied. If you hadn't fixed things, our team might not even exist anymore. At noon, Miguel attended the student council meeting. The room was packed with students from all grades and backgrounds. The new principal, Dr. Lakshmi, hired after Dr. Harrison had abruptly decided to pursue other opportunities, sat in the back, listening rather than directing. The council, now more diverse than ever before, discussed upcoming projects with genuine enthusiasm. When Blake proposed using part of the student activity budget to create a maintenance appreciation day, Miguel felt his chest tighten with emotion. After school, Miguel was surprised to find an envelope in his office mailbox. Inside was an official letter from the school board, offering him a promotion to facilities director with a significant raise. A handwritten note from Mr. Westfield was attached. Sometimes we need someone brave enough to show us our blind spots. Thank you. That evening, as Miguel drove home, he reflected on how much had changed. The disciplinary committee had done its work fairly but firmly. Most students had accepted their punishments and learned from them. Parents had become more involved, often volunteering alongside their children during community service hours. At home, his daughters were waiting with a small cake. "Dad, we heard about the promotion," Elena exclaimed, hugging him. "How does it feel to be a hero?" his older daughter Sophia asked with a proud smile. Miguel shook his head modestly. "I'm not a hero. I just did what was right." "That's exactly what makes someone a hero," Sophia insisted. Later, sitting on his porch watching the sunset, Miguel thought about the lessons of the past 6 months. Sometimes one person could make a difference. Sometimes speaking truth to power actually worked. And sometimes, even the most entitled people could change when held accountable. His phone buzzed with a text from Coach Martinez. "Guess what? 3 more colleges coming to scout our swimmers next week. Your cameras changed EVERYDKing." Miguel smiled. In fixing the pool problem, he had done more than just stop parties. He had helped create a community where everyone, regardless of wealth or status, was held to the same standards and given the same opportunities to succeed. That, he decided, was worth every risk he had taken.